So again, welcome to the Boston Tableau User Group Meetup. We're going to give a few announcements before we go into our speakers. Some awesome new features that you may or may not be aware of on the Tableau Community Hub, the Tableau Jobs blog, which is awesome. I know from this group and by DataFam in general, there's opportunity. There's a great fit for us with our superpowers. So hoping that really, that really helps our community. I think that's a great thing. The Racial Equity Data Hub, lots of fantastic data in there as well, and information. Community Task Force Gallery, beautiful, beautiful visualizations in there from Spencer Bach, Jaggernaut, a bunch that I really enjoy. Diversity and Data Project month. Myself and we hosted the SportsViz. You can access that data at any time, that monthly challenge. We were using NFL salary cap data, and we're going right up to NFL free agency, and certainly a standpoint. So if you get a shot, please go in and play with that data. And just in that data too, we will be updating it once all the week 1 rosters are set. So if you started making that and then Matt Stafford got traded and kind of blew a theory you had, well, we're going to update that. Speakers today, Heidi is going to be doing a great 20 tips in 24 minutes, she told me, but it's 20 tips in 20 minutes with a little bit of introduction, great stuff in there. And Tim Cady is going to be coming on later. TC is going to be talking. He has a presentation. Regex is really, really cool for him who hasn't done or tried that before. We want to give a big shout out to Christian and Chris Scott, who are going to be joining us as Tableau doctors. So if you haven't noticed this as you sat down, right next to tables like 13 and something on the left side, you'll see Doctor 1 and Doctor 2. So after we get done with the presentations, if you want to, you can jump into one of those doctors, and they're offering their time to help you through whatever issue you're struggling with. So this is going to be the networking at the end, along with the Tableau Doctor thing. Essentially, just like you did now, you grab a seat, find someone you know, find someone you don't know, or visit the doctor, and all the presenters will be jumping off the stage to interact at the end. So I'll leave this up. I'm going to close my presentation now and turn it over to Heidi.
Thank you. Just check that everything's starting. All right.
There you go. And you're able to share from there, Heidi?
Sure. There we go. All right. Let me just hide that down at the bottom. Okay, and actually minimize that window so that I don't see myself, because that is kind of confusing. So hi everybody, I'm Heidi Keiber. I'm an analytics evangelist with the Information Lab here in Germany. So good evening from me. I hear you all on your lunch break. Yeah, I'm a Tableau social media ambassador, newly minted from the year 2020. I also lead Data Plus Women here in Germany, and you are absolutely free to connect with me on Twitter at the Heidi K, or to check out my blog at queenofdata.net. So just a warning before I start. Yeah, Will already mentioned this is not going to be 20 tips in 20 minutes. So the title is slightly misleading. It's going to be 21 tips in 24 minutes maybe. So I hope you'll bear with me. It's going to be fast though. So please do me a favor and don't try to click along. Don't try to take notes or anything, because chances are you will miss one tip or another. But the good news is that everything I'm showing here is up on my blog. So you can find everything there if you just check out queenofdata.net. So if you have a favorite tip, feel free to tell the others in the chat or to network with me afterwards. I'll stick around for a bit. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So tips number 1 and 2 are about formatting. So what we have here, I have a world map. I'm looking how much more or less time it took to do your taxes. So we can see in Germany, it took less time. Please be a bit faster. In Kazakhstan, it took the same time, but in Myanmar, it took a lot more time. And I want to make this very obvious. So you can see we do have the minus symbol for all the countries where it takes less time now, but we don't have the plus for the countries where it took more time. And we can actually edit that. So I'll just right click and format and go into that field. And if I go to custom, I can add in a plus sign at the very front here. But I do want to make it even more obvious. So I will add a little triangle, an upward triangle where we have more time and a downward triangle where we have less time. And to do that, I go to my favorite browser, use any browser, use any search engine, and we go for UTF-8 signs. In my case, I'm looking for triangles. So UTF-8 is a special alphabet of special characters where you will find everything from triangles to cups of coffee. And I just need this triangle here. I will copy that, go back to Tableau and insert that here at the very beginning, which is my positive numbers. And then I will go back and look for the downward triangle, copy this one, and again, go back and insert that for the negative numbers. So now we have the upward triangle for positive, downward triangle for negative. But we also have the upward triangle for where we have plus minus 0. And that just doesn't make any sense because it's plus minus 0. So let's go back here and let's look for the plus minus sign. Not in Python. Oh no, come on. I don't actually need that. So I will just basically copy this from anywhere. And if I go back in here, so you can see we have positive numbers first, semicolon, then we have the negative numbers. And if we add in another semicolon, we can actually have the 0 values back here. So now we have positive values, negative values, plus minus 0. We have the downward triangle for negative, upward triangle for positive, and the plus minus 0 for 0 values. So that was tip number 1. Tip number 2. Now this is pretty obvious with the triangles already, but let's say we want to make it even more obvious and we want to give some text that says either less time or more time or the same amount of time. And sure, I could do a calculated field where I say, okay, depending on the sign or depending on whether it's above or below 0, let's choose some string. But what if I don't want to create a calculated field? I only need it in this one sheet. Well, I can also do that with formatting. So let's just get rid of everything here and let's type in more time or less time for negative values, and then the same amount of time for 0 values. So now we have less time for negative, more time for positive, and same amount of time for 0 values without creating a calculated field, just with formatting. Tableau can do a number of crazy things and some very fanciful things that may not be super useful. So you will probably have created a bubble chart at some point in your life just because they're kind of pretty. So what if we could do a bubble chart with symbols instead? Now that would be cool, right? Well, we can't do that quite yet. But as I said, UTF-8 signs have a crazy number of special signs, special characters. So if you look for, let's say, UTF-8 pictures or something, you will find a whole lot of pictures or special characters that are still just characters and that you can use in a string. So from anything from tulips and roses to slices of pizza, a watch, a snowman, etc. And if you go a bit further with that, well, you can kind of do a bubble chart with symbols by using a word cloud. So what I did here is I duplicated my field and I edited the aliases. So I now have the club sign for agriculture, and I have the musical notes for entertainment, and I have I don't know what that's in English, but that one thing stuffy for health. And if I simply drop that on text, I now kind of have a bubble chart with pictures, close as we can get right now. All right, let's go on to labeling, because formatting is a lot of fun in Tableau, right? So let's say I want to label using the year. Now, what I can do right now is I can either label the inside, the beginning of the bars, or I can label the outside end of the bar. But what if I want to label the inside end of my bar? Well, I can't easily do that using the label function, but I can somehow accomplish this anyway by simply duplicating my axis. Now, the second axis, that shouldn't be a bar, it should be a Gantt bar. And you can probably see where I'm going with this, because I now want to label this one, and not on the outside, but instead on the inside. And if I now duplicate my, sorry, don't duplicate, I make this a dual axis. Remember to synchronize, of course, and get rid of that header up above. Then you can see I have labeled the inside end of my bar. Easily done. But let's say I want to label, I don't know, on top of my bar, because why not? Well, then I can do that if I just want to label using the value that I have on my axis by simply adding in a reference line per cell, of course, so that I have one everywhere. And then let's just make the line invisible, and let's label using the value. And what we can do now is we can now, if I manage to grab it, format the reference line, and I can change the alignment. So I could have it inside, and let's say I want to have this on top of my bar, then I have labeled on top of my bar using a reference line. All right, sometimes you will probably use the pages feature, and for some reason, let's say your users want to print this to PDF, because why not? For reasons unknown. So if I print this to PDF, what I would kind of expect would be, where can I, yeah, let's just save this anywhere. What I would expect is to have one page in PDF per Tableau page, right? But unfortunately, that is not quite what is happening. So I have only this one page in here for the one that was just open in Tableau. But that's not what I want, right? That's not why I'm using the pages feature. So how can I change that? Well, I simply go to File, Page Setup. And in here at the very bottom, I have the option for the pages shelf. And I don't want to only show the current page. And we can see this will give me 6 pages. And if I now print this to PDF, yes, and yes, and yes, I want to overwrite. Then you can see I will have a PDF page per Tableau page. And let's just wait until this opens up. So you can see I have Africa, Asia, Europe, Middle East, Oceania, and the Americas. One page per Tableau page, just by changing the page settings. Sometimes you're using calculated fields, and maybe you're still working on them, so you have a number of comments in there. So in my case, let's make this a bit bigger so that you can actually read this. So if you hold your Control key for me and then use your mouse wheel, you can actually make this bigger so that people can read what you're doing, especially important in screen share sessions. So you can see I have it currently in days, but I actually decided I do want it in hours. So it's easy enough to comment this one out. But then I would have to go through here and then delete 2 slashes and then jump a line and again delete 2 slashes and go through here. And I mean, it's easy if it's just these 5 lines, but let's say it's a longer computation, then that would take me what felt like hours. But what I can do instead, if it's everything underneath each other, I can press my Alt key, and then I can simply highlight characters that are directly on top of each other and get rid of them all at once. And now I have it in hours. All right, sometimes we need helper axes. So for example, the minimum 0 that we need in order to create a donut chart is really not something we will ever use again. We don't want to show this, but it can be quite helpful to actually have a name here that is not aggregate of minimum 0 or the aggregate of minimum 0, 2. So I'm hoping that as we can already rename map layers, it will sometime be possible to do this as well, but it's not for the moment as far as I know. So what can we do instead? Well, we simply double click on this ad hoc calculation, go to the very first position, add in 2 slashes, and this one is my dough. So let's do this. And then I simply add in a line break by holding my shift and pressing enter. And now it's using this comment that I added in the first line. In the pill, it's using that on the axis, and it's also renaming the thingy in my maps card. And I can do the same thing for the other axis. So again, go to first position, and this is the donut hole. Add a line break, press enter, and there we go. And now I can easily distinguish between these two. And the fun thing is, and this is tip number 9, if I now persist this, so I drag this over to the left-hand side, Tableau is not asking me to rename because it's assuming this is the name I was meaning to assign. So that is 1 more second that I'm saving here. All right. There's a couple of rules that you should never break in data visualization. One of them is you are never allowed to truncate your axis when you are using a bar chart. But opinions vary when we're talking about line charts. So we have these values pretty close to each other. So this is ranging from 54% to 44%. Are we allowed to truncate the axis? Yes, no. Well, kind of unsure, and I don't want to take that decision away from the end users. So I want to give them the option to choose, and we can do that by using a parameter. So let me first set up this parameter. Let's call this zoom axis question mark so that they know it's a question they have to answer. And let's make this a Boolean value. If they want to zoom, then yes. And if they don't want to zoom, then no. And now I need a calculated field, which I will call 0 line. And this should be, if the user wants to zoom the axis, then I want to have null. And in any other case, if they don't want to zoom, then I want 0 in here. And this will become clear in just a second, because now I am dropping this onto detail, and let's actually show the parameters so that we can see what we're doing. And I want to add a reference line using this 0 line. It can be for the entire table. I definitely don't want to label. I don't want a tooltip. And I don't want a line, but I will use one anyway so that you can see what I'm doing at first. So let's make this really bold and bright pink. So what happens now? If I want to zoom my axis, then the 0 line appears. And if I don't want to zoom my axis, it disappears. We need one more step, actually. I'll actually show this for now. One more step is not including 0 on my axis. So I do want this to remain automatic. I don't want to fix this. That's the opposite of what I want. I do want it to stay flexible, but I don't necessarily want to include 0 unless I have the 0 line shown. And if I do want to zoom my axis, then the 0 line vanishes and Tableau can zoom the axis. But if I don't want to, then it is forced to include 0 because I am showing the 0 line. And now we can make this invisible because we don't actually want to see it. And now I can zoom my axis or show the full axis, whichever way the end user wants. At the moment, we can't really shade tooltips that well. So let's say I want to have all the European countries in this teal color and all the African countries with this lilac color in the tooltip background. But I can't really do that using the tooltip options I have. But what I can do is I can create an extra sheet. I've prepared a little bit here. Actually make this a bar chart, and I do want to see this full bar. So let's edit the axis here. Let's fix this. I don't want to see my axis, but I do want these bars to be in full size, and I don't actually want to see the countries either. And let's make this fit the entire view. Now, for the moment, this looks awful, and let's actually change the color a bit here. Yeah, this looks awful for now, a bit like a colorful barcode, but we're not quite finished. So we go back to this map and go into the tooltip, and we're actually using a viz in tooltip by inserting this sheet called tip 11. Yep, that's the one. And I don't want the height to be 300. This is 100. And if I now hover, we can see that this is taking the color of the region, just as we did, because this is in fact a visualization where we have the shaded bar in the background. We can basically do, one more thing. Okay, and different thing on color. So let's say I want to assign a color here, and knowing your company, you will probably have a CI palette, your corporate corporate identity colors, and maybe if you're good, you know the HTML code by heart by now, but I personally don't. And I do have my custom color palettes, but I can't reach them if everything should be the same color. So what do? I create an ad hoc calculation. Let's make this really anything, and just put this on detail. And if I now switch this to color, this will have the same string, in this case, in every row of my data. And now, because I have something on color, I can reach my custom color palette, and I can make that this beautiful light green color that I have in here from my CI palette. We have another bar chart. So let's say I want to color historical all-time highs. What am I talking about? So we can see 2000 at the time was the highest value ever. 2001 at the time was the highest value ever. 2002 wasn't again. And I want to see those historical all-time highs. We can do that by simply using a calculator field, historical all-time highs. And this is pretty simple because I want to know whether the sum of energy usage, so the thing I have on rows, was equal to the window max of the exact same field. Not window max, sorry, that was a bit confusing. The running max, there we go. Because that looks like what is the highest value at the time. And if I put this on color, we can already see my all-time highs are marked in orange, but let's actually make this a bit more discrete, and you will see why in a second, because we will be reusing this. Let's talk a bit about geographical data. So I have this option region here, and if I simply create a map and then drop region on color, that works. But we can see that region at the moment is not a geographical field. So if I only have region on the map, it's not doing anything. But I can actually make region a geographical field by going in here and go to geographic role, and then we can create this role from country, because that is the next lowest geographical field of which the region is composed. And if we do that and change this to map, then we can see that Tableau will calculate these new polygons and basically add all the underlying countries together to create a region. And now we have Europe, we have Asia, we have Africa, we have the Americas as one field, and we can see Tableau even created this hierarchy for us. All right, let's say I want to change the background. I want to make the seas, I don't know, bright pink, because that's my favorite color for the moment. And I don't have this option. So I can make the seas black, or I can make them blue if I want to, but without using an external mapping service, I can't really change anything here. So what can I do? I can simply remove the base here, and then I can go to format the shading, and simply shade the worksheet and make that pink. And then we can see now my seas are bright pink for whatever reason. We can go one step further. We can actually shade the background on a dashboard, obviously. But let's say I don't always want to shade the background because some people like to print this. So I've created this one sheet. We could also simply use an empty object, but just to drive this home, I have a sheet that is all green, and I often want this dashboard to be bright green, but I also sometimes want it to be white because people like to print things, right? And I don't want them to use too much toner. So I have this button in here that allows me to make this white and then again to shade this dashboard. And what is actually happening in here? So if we check this out, this is just a button that allows me to hide or show a floating object. And if I look to this element, we can see that this dashboard is just floating around. And if I move this, we can see that this in the background, again, just a floating container that will vanish if I click the hide button, and that will appear again if I use the show button. So that's how you can allow colorful backgrounds, but also make this white whenever you need. One more thing. Now, this is just between colorful and white, but what if I want to give a full range of colors? I have created a color picker, and you can see I have the different sectors. On color, it's really not important as long as it gives me different colors. And I also have a color sheet, which is basically just a tree map with the minimum number of records, so basically minimum of 1 in here, which again is not important. And I've also created a set. And at the moment, this set contains all the values that I have in here. Again, really not important. That will determine which colors are available. And what I'm going to do is I have everything in here. You can see I have the tree map in the background, and then I have my bar chart hovering in front, and I have my color picker in here. And what I want to do is I want to assign a set action. So I go to dashboard, actions, and add a change set values action, and I want to set my color here. So when I click on the color picker by selecting, I want to affect my color set. Now let's actually make this hover because it's more funny. And I do want to keep my set values when clearing the selection. And what happens now is if I hover over any of these, it will simply filter on that color in the background, because you remember I have this set and I have put the set on filter, so everything that is in the set will remain here. And you can see I can simply iterate through these colors until I find one that works for me. But what if my users don't know what to do? So what they see now is a colored dashboard and this kind of colorful wheel in the top right-hand corner, but they don't really know what to do with all of this, right? So what can we do? Well, we will simply copy the image. So take a screenshot essentially, and then go to any kind of layouting program that you like to use. Personally, I have zero idea how to use Photoshop. So what I do is I use PowerPoint. I will happily admit that. And you go in here and you simply paste in your screenshot. In my case, I've kind of prepared that, as you can see. And then what I like to do, you can see I have this frame in the background that helps me align things perfectly. And I will align that perfectly with the screenshot so that it gives me a reference for where I need to place things. And then I can simply place objects in here. Let's actually place in another one. So let's maybe use this one. Hide overlay. All right, this is the wrong way around, but you get what I'm saying. So you add in a bunch of objects that you want to use to explain things. You could even say who to reach out to, etc. And then what you do by the end of it, you get rid of your screenshot, and then you use the frame and everything that's in it and save that as a picture. Well, all of it, obviously. So save all of that as a picture. Then this is in German. And then what you do, you go back to Tableau and you insert a floating vertical container. you add in your image in here. Make sure to use the whole of everything. So you want to use the, yes, delete everything. You want to use the full size of your dashboard. And then you again add a show hide button. In this case, I made this light bulb to make it very obvious that this is where we can get information. And then you can see this is my image that I simply overlaid to help with things. You can even see the frame in here. If you align that perfectly, they can use that to understand how to use the dashboard, so you can impart instructions on how to interact with this here. All right, so what we're currently doing, we are using a hover action in here, which can be confusing because, you know, maybe they want to choose this blue color, then they move the cursor and suddenly it's pink, which is not something that should happen. So we could, of course, make this a select action instead. But the thing is, then they have to click and click again to, you know, not have everything else grayed out. What if we couldn't make Tableau stop graying everything else out? Well, we can actually do that. So what we do, we go to this field, we call this, let's say this is deselect, and I just need anything in here. It doesn't have to be the word deselect as long as it's the same for every single row in my data. And using this field, I will put this on detail so that it is computed for the view. And that's everything I need to do in the sheet. But going back to the dashboard, I will add in another action, and I will add in a highlight action. Because the reason that everything else is grayed out, because it currently highlights just the thing that has been clicked. If I want to highlight everything so that nothing gets grayed out, I have to use a field that is in place for everything. And that's the one I just created, this deselect field. So if I now click on a color, you can see the color gets assigned, and it even has this black frame showing that I just clicked it, but everything else does not get grayed out because everything is highlighted. So that's one way to combat this graying out thing. All right, and 2 tips for the end. If you want to move things around, floating objects, you can of course use your arrow keys, which will be super slow, as you can see, but you can also use shift and arrow, and you can see that goes a lot faster. So doing that will save you a lot of time if for some reason you don't have access to your mouse or want to align things perfectly. And one bonus tip, let's say you are still developing this and you want to give some, I don't know, some information, some tips, some to-dos to either yourself at some point in the future or to a colleague who you're handing this over to, but you also want to already make this dashboard available to end users, and you don't want them to see this kind of tip, but you still want it to be very, very obvious. So let us add in a floating text object. This is important information you shouldn't miss. And let's make this really big and bold and in a color that you definitely can't miss. Now, of course, if you leave it in the middle of the dashboard, that's not super helpful. And if you try to drag it outside the dashboard, Tableau will try to simply throw it off because it assumes if you don't want it on the dashboard, you want to delete it. So what can we do? Well, we can, of course, use Control and your arrow keys to move it to the very edge of the dashboard. The Tableau will stop there. So whatever I do, I can't move it further unless I go to Layout and manually add in that I want this to be not at 1000 pixels, but actually at 1200 pixels. And then I have moved it outside the dashboard. So users can use this dashboard and only developers will see this super important information that I definitely wanted them to see. So that was the bonus tip. That was my 21st tip out of these 20. I hope you had some fun, learned something. I'm excited to see which one was your favorite tip. And again, you can find all of these written down with screenshots, with GIFs, whatever you can imagine on queenofdata.net on my blog. If you have any further questions, do feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, Twitter, or even Instagram, if that's your thing. And you can also find my portfolio on Tableau Public. You will not find this workbook on there, however. So yeah, thanks for your attention, and back to you, Bill.
Heidi, that was amazing. So much good stuff in there. The UTF-8 character trick that you showed right at the beginning, and then the highest historical value at the time calculation, like those were things I was struggling with now, like projects I was working on. So I'm sure I'm not alone with everybody that you just saved them a bunch of time. And I don't know about anybody else, but I love dark background dashboards and get very salty when somebody tells me, yeah, but I can't print that. So that trick, like the set action on the background color, was just awesome. And hopefully for all of us out there that are dark background people, that will help alleviate a lot of tension. So can't thank you enough. Again, please, if you have any questions for Heidi or for Tim, for TC coming up, please use the Q&A section on the top right. We'll monitor the chat, but that's the best place for them. And awesome, bravo again. That was fantastic. That was. So we'll turn it over to TC. You there, Tim? I know you said you were having some video issues, but you got your audio working?
Yeah, the audio should be working. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Perfect.
We just I told Tim, he said he was having some video issues. He's got eagle stuff all over the side of his wall, so it's like, this is perfect. We don't have to look at that crap. So,
all right, go ahead.
Do you have? Are you able to share? Wunderbar. All right, and I'll turn it over to TC.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. All right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome. So, as you can see, kind of from my title slide here, I'm going to be talking a little bit about regular expressions, or regex. This will be pretty much an introduction. By quick disclaimer, by no means do I consider myself a regex expert. This is the tool I've picked up over quarantine for a couple of my projects and my day-to-day work. And I thought it made sense to kind of share with the greater community. So with that, let me do a quick introduction first. My screen here. There we are. A little bit about me. I just joined the team at JPMorgan Chase. I've been there about 2 months. Been loving it so far. Previous to that, I did independent contracting here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I was a data viz COE lead before that. Originally from New Hampshire. I was talking to Will the other night, and it turns out we actually went to school probably about 20, 30, 40 minutes from each other. So we're pretty close growing up, from a distance perspective. So that was interesting. And like Will mentioned, diehard Eagles fan. I'm still running off that high from the Super Bowl a few years back. So sorry, Patriots fans. But anyway, what we're really here for is to talk about regular expressions. And I'll get into that. Here's the agenda for what we're going to cover today. Talk a little bit about what a regular expression is and when you should even use it. We'll walk through some of the basic syntax, some of the basic expressions. And then finally, we'll put it into practice. We'll look at those 4 different regular expression calculations that exist in Tableau. And we'll walk through some demos to take a look at exactly how they work. Now, like I mentioned, I've kind of prepared this with the mindset that regular expressions might be new to a lot of folks. And this might look overwhelming at first, and that's okay. That's completely normal reaction. What I'll try to do is break it down piece by piece. But feel free to pop questions in the Q&A if something comes up. All right, so first, let's talk about what a regular expression even is. So the simplest way to kind of describe or define a regular expression is that it's a sequence of characters that define a search pattern. Now, a search pattern isn't something you typically use in your Tableau day-to-day lives. So what is that? So a search pattern is, if we're looking at the example below, the section we've highlighted in yellow there. So in this case, we're using an extract statement on a field called comment field. And that highlighted yellow section is what we are calling a search pattern when it comes to regex. So that expression might look overwhelming at first, and that's okay. That's a normal reaction to regex when you get first introduced to it. The important thing to know at this point, that particular pattern that you're seeing is a common search pattern for something like an address. And you can see from the examples I have below there that there's some common examples for address, phone numbers, emails, those sort of things. Don't worry too much about that right now. We're going to circle back and I'll go through that example piece by piece. The important thing to know, like I said, at this point is just that it's used for an address, and that particular section is called a search pattern. So now that you know what a regular expression is, you need to know when to use it. Whoop, 1 second, went too far. Really, a regular expression can be used in any free-form text field, right, to identify a particular substring. But that doesn't always mean you should use it. Ideally, regex should be leveraged when working with unstructured data. So that could be something like comment or notes field. Maybe you have a CSV file that's missing a delimiter. But the important thing, the critical piece, is that you're leveraging regex and unstructured data. That's when it's most valuable. Now, based on the previous example we just talked about, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, I can accomplish some of those things with a contain statement, or maybe even a split. And in some cases, you'd be right. But again, where regex becomes most valuable is working with unstructured data. Like I said, something like a comment field. So in the examples below, while contains and split might work situationally, they're not going to cover all your bases like a regex statement would, right? So you can see by those examples that contains would work in one case and split might work in another, but regex would work for both instances. So again, the key takeaway from understanding when to use regex is unstructured data, things like comment fields, notes fields, and if you have any data source about delimiters. So I promised you we'd go back and break down that example from earlier, that address example. And the best way to do that is to break it down piece by piece. So when you're reading a regular expression or regex statement, what I always recommend to folks is to do it positionally. Do it one character at a time, kind of one word at a time. So looking at the address 21 Jump Street, what's happening here is that first position is \D 1 through 5. Really what that's identifying is generally an address is going to start with a number. So that's searching for a digit between 1 to 5 characters. In this case, it finds 21. Then it's going to search for a space. If your data is not completely dirty, it's going to find that space after the number. And then it's going to search for a word, right? So what the /W+ means, it's looking for an alphanumeric character that is more than one character. And we'll get into the plus and the repeater meta characters in just a minute. But the important thing to notice here is that W+ means it's looking for alphanumeric with more than one character. And of course, another space. And finally, wrapping up, again, the W+, and in this case, with a period, to look for instances of street, road, those sort of things to wrap up the address. So let's look at some basic meta characters and basic repeating characters and these sort of things when it comes to writing a regex statement. So as we already talked about a little bit in the previous example, a \D in your statement is going to be looking for any number. Now, regex is case sensitive. So if you change that to an uppercase D, you're going to be looking for anything but a number. And it works the same with spaces, right? So lowercase s, looking for a space, anything but a space for uppercase. And works the same with alphanumeric characters. So W, for lowercase, looking for alphanumeric characters with lowercase w's, and looking for anything but with an uppercase. And in regex, a period is a wildcard, but it can be used in quite a few different ways. We'll get into kind of how the wildcards work in just a moment. And also important to know, while a period is a wildcard by default, if it's preceded by a backslash, that means the period becomes a literal period. So instead of a wildcard placeholder, it's going to be a period like you saw in our previous example when we were looking for street or road or some sort of a suffix for that address. So repeating characters for regex. So these are characters that are used, there's one more there. These are characters that are used if there's multiple instances of any character you're searching for. So what I mean by that is earlier you saw us search for \W plus. So what I'm saying there is I'm looking for any letter within a word that's going to be one or more instances. So it could be the letter A, it could be, you know, like we saw in the previous example, jump. But the important thing to know is that there's at least one letter and there could be more. A question mark where we have that plus sign would suggest or tell the statement that there's either going to be 0 or 1 instance. Basically, I don't know if it exists, but if it does, there's only going to be one of them. And an asterisk does something similar. I don't know if it exists, but if it does, there could be several. And finally, the curly brackets with a digit, again, like you saw in the Jump Street example, tells us that we are searching for a specified instance. So going back to our example, we're looking for characters 1 through 5, I believe. Let me go back there just to verify. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing yet. Yes, oh, sorry about that. We're looking for digits 1 through 5. What that's telling the that's telling the search pattern there is I think there's a max of 5 digits, but there's at least going to be 1. All right, so going forward, those are repeating characters. Those are our basic characters. There are a few more. There are meta characters, and this includes a capturing group. So of course, Tableau is going to have, you know, its default opening and closing parentheses for any calculations. But what these parentheses, these nested parentheses will do is determine what your capturing group is, what exactly it is you want to return from the regex statement. The brackets represent a range of characters, and we'll talk about that more in the next section there, sets and ranges. And I've already mentioned it, but the backslash in front of any other meta character represents a literal or an escape of that character. So like we talked about in the period on the previous screen, right? Period by itself represents a wildcard. A period accompanied with a backslash represents a literal period. Sets and ranges. So anything within a bracket, like we just talked about, is going to tell your search pattern. You're searching between a range of characters, a range of numbers. So for example, A through Z is going to search for any letters between A and Z. It is case sensitive, right? So you do have to tell the search pattern whether you want those letters to be uppercase or lowercase. You can search for digits the same way. Important to know, these can be mixed and matched. So if you want to search for, let's say, A through F, and then through numbers 1 through 3, those can be all added within the same set and range brackets there. Now, these are just the introduction to meta characters. There are quite a few more. If there's interest, I'm developing kind of a intermediate to advanced section or presentation on regex as well. And we'll get into more of those meta characters then. But a few that are important to know if you're interested in learning more is the caret represents that you want to find a substring at the beginning of your statement. A $sign would suggest you want it at the end of your statement. And then a pipe meta character would say, I want either or. So a good example of that is Maybe you're searching for bat or cat. So what you would say with that meta character is you'd put B on one side and C on the other, and your search statement is going to find any references replacing either of those characters for bat or cat. All right, so that was a real quick kind of introduction to the basic characters, basic syntax of Regex. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Tableau has four different types of regular expression calculations. The first being Regex extract. So this is going to return to you a string that matches your capturing group. So it's going to return the literal substring. From there, you can append it or add it as a filter or what have you. Regex Match, this is essentially a Boolean. So it's going to return to true or false, whether something exists or not from your search pattern. Regex Replace, think of this as a copy and replace rather on steroids, right? So you're searching for a particular pattern. Once it's identified, you then want Regex to replace whatever currently exists there. And finally, the last one, which we're not going to get into too much today, is Regex extract inth. So what that's going to do is return a substring that matches to the nth degree. So for the example of extract, let's say that pattern existed 3 or 4 times within your given string. We can tell Tableau, hey, I want to take the 3rd instance of that match, and that's what I actually want to extract. But like I said, we're not going to get into that too much today. That's a little more advanced. So with that, what we're going to do now is hop over to a demo. Give me just a moment. Of course, Tableau public, which is where this workbook is usually stored. Just having some problems today, so I'm just going to pull this up from my desktop. And while I'm waiting for this to load, Will, have there been any questions, anything in the Q&A we need to kind of address?
From Betsy, so there were 2 here for Heidi asking if you could share that workbook and if all those tips were on your website on queendata.net. For you, from Betsy Landon, is there an app that makes creating Regex statements easier to write?
Yes, there is, and that's a resource I'll get in towards the end of the presentation. But absolutely, there's a couple different websites that you can go to that will help you troubleshoot Regex statements and kind of create your own. But one moment here, sorry about this. Tableau's public picked a terrible day to not work.
That's okay. Really good stuff so far. It's not a demo without something going wrong.
So I'm going to open up a new workbook from scratch here because it doesn't look like this is going to cooperate with me. One moment.
While you're loading that up, Chris Scott asked, are there limitations on when you can and cannot use Regex?
Limitations? No, not necessarily. But like I said, the key point when you're determining whether you should use Regex or not is determining if your data is unstructured. And I gave a couple examples of those earlier. You know, a lot of the times you could use things like contains or a split or what have you to make your life a little bit easier. But no limitations that I'm aware of. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna put this on this screen here. Let me know if you can see that all right. It looks like it resized it a little bit. Okay, so what I have prepared is the Airbnb data from the greater Seattle area. I've dirtied it up a little bit just for the sake of our examples. But we're going to go through those 3 statements that I just mentioned and a couple different use cases. All right, so the first being, let's go ahead and hop into sheet 1. All right, so the first is a field called links. Let me pull that in. And yeah, that's fine. We'll add all members, and I'll make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see it. Oh, not that. Oh boy. Let's do 12. And we'll just do this for now. All right. So our first example is using regex extract. What we want to do here is extract a particular piece of this URL. But you can see our problem here is there's multiple URLs. There's rooms, there's users mixed in. I think those are more towards the bottom, but they're in there. Come on. There you are. Users mixed in, there's rooms. Depending on how this is structured, you could use a split here because there is a pipe delimiter, but you'll see that some of them actually don't have a pipe. So we're going to use regex to solve this. What we would do, and again, sorry for the size. It looks like my screen's got all jacked up when I had technical difficulties. But we're going to create a regex extract statement. And the first thing we need to do is we need to tell it what field to look at, of course. The field we're looking at is links in this case. We know that each of those links is going to have a common prefix, right? So it's always going to be Airbnb in this case. Now, we need to tell it what our capturing pattern is. So we're going to do a plus sign and then start listing out our capturing pattern. So this is where it gets a little tricky. So we know that the each user or each URL, right, is each piece of that URL separated by backslash. So the first thing we're going to do is make that backslash literal. Like we talked about earlier, anything, I'm sorry, the forward slash literal, anything that's coming after a backslash becomes literal instead of its base meta character value. Then we know that after that slash, there's going to be some sort of word, right, between A and Z. It doesn't matter at this point how many characters that is. We just know that there's a range of alpha characters that we want to capture. And then finally, after that, if we were looking for, rooms as opposed to users, we need to add one more backslash, and we need to identify the digits. One moment, let me fix that real quick. So we know we're bringing in a series of digits. Those digits, while it looks like most of them are 6 or 7 characters, we don't want to necessarily specify. We don't want to hard code the number of characters in. We're going to do this here to identify our, like I said, our digits. And then finally, we're going to wrap this up with a closed parenthesis. So going through this one more time, we're using an extract on links. Anything with the prefix Airbnb, we are looking for a /word/digit. So what that will return to us, and it probably should name that calculation, but let me go back and we're going to call this our extract statement. If I put that on text, you'll see what that's going to return are the references, or the prefixes rather, might be a better description, of the room URL and the room, the ID number associated with each of those room URLs. So from here, right, we can, put that in some sort of search field or filter or what have you, or even append that to the prefix of the URL if we wanted to provide a hyperlink. So that is extract. That's how that works.
Real quick,
Yeah.
Tim. a question from the group, and that looked like it updated really fast. I know you're not using, maybe the biggest of data sets, but is there performance loss or gain compared to using Regex compared to using contains or split where possible?
That's a question that's come up a couple of times, and to be completely honest, I haven't done any performance recording comparisons. I know it's a question that's come up in questions, sessions at TC. The answer seems to be no. There is no performance dip off, but again, I haven't done the comparison, the performance recordings to verify that.
And one more, and thank you. That was from Claire Douglas, and one more from Alejandro. Can you use Regex to find, add, replace non-printable characters in Tableau? So, for example, adding carriage return tabs or line breaks, things like that.
I believe so. I think that's a little more advanced. I've seen references to doing that, but that's not something I've ever done myself.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, in some of the classes I've attended on Regex, that was possible, but I haven't dug into it much, to be fair.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So that's our example for Regex Replace. I'm sorry, for Regex Extract. The one we're going to do next is Regex Replace. And what we're going to use for this is, let's use, what's the field called? Right, here we are. And I'm going to, again, make this a little bit bigger, easier to read. And we'll just fit width and resize this header a little bit. So what I have here are references to the description for each room that we just pulled URLs for. So you can see there's a lot of bedrooms, which is great, but then there's a lot of abbreviations, whether it be BD, BDRM, so on and so forth. Let's say for whatever reason we wanted to get rid of those abbreviations, and we wanted to spell out the full word bedroom. Now, this might not necessarily be the best use case for that, but if you are in your organization dealing with, social media comments or some sort of online reputation management, that might be a situation where you want to clean these sort of things. So again, we're just going to start by creating a calculated field. And this will be our Regex Replace statement. We're going to reference the field we're using, name, a little bit bigger. Now I know the abbreviation is only going to come in a few different forms, right? So it's going to be a capital B or lowercase b. Going to be, again, a capital D or lowercase. Same thing with R, same thing with M. So I know it's going to be some combination of those 4 letters. So I'm going to put those in my range. Like I mentioned earlier, you can mix and match a lowercase, uppercase, and if I had numbers, I could put those in there as well. And then I'm going to tell it to that 4 letters or that abbreviation is most likely going to end with a space. And then what I want it to replace that abbreviation with is the full spelled out word of bedroom with a space at the end. And let's name this. And go ahead and find that calculation. Drag that in. So what you'll see, oh, we had a bit of an error there. I see what happened. So all the ones that currently had bedroom existed, looks like they just duplicated them. But the ones that we were trying to capture here, and it looks like I just need to tweak that statement a little bit. But any references to that abbreviation, let's look at these ones only. These are our best examples. So any references to that abbreviation of bedroom now gets replaced with that full spelled out version. Like I said, this I probably needed to tweak that calculation a little bit to to accommodate anything that's already spelled correctly. But the idea in this case was to replace the abbreviations. Again, maybe not necessarily the best use case in hindsight, but if you're doing any sort of cleaning of note fields, or like I said, social media feedback, replace this regex statement's a great tool for that. And we got one last example. I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll do Q&A and a couple of quick closing comments. Our last one is our match statement. So if you'll remember, this was our Boolean true or false, whether something exists or not. What I have here is a city-state zip field. I'll blow this up one more time too. So it's a city-state zip field, but it looks like I have some problems with my zip codes. Some of them appear to have lost a trailing or leading zero, most likely a trailing. So what I want to do to address that is, first I want to identify exactly which ones have lost that digit. So what I'm going to do is our Regex Match, and we're going to tell it what field to reference. So of course it's our city-state zip. And what we're going to look for, again, it's that range that we mentioned earlier. So it's going to be the 0 through 9. I know a zip code is going to exist, between those numbers, of course. And generally, the zip code is going to be 5 characters, or at least in our example it is. So I'm going to tell it exactly the length of those digits that I want to identify. Close my statement, close my capturing group, and go ahead and actually let's name this calculation before I do all that. And we'll close this for match, and we're going to go ahead and drag this in. And you can see, in this case, they were actually, sorted pretty nicely for me. But you can see it's identified exactly which digits, which zip codes are missing a digit. So from here, we could do some additional cleaning, whether that was adding another 0 on the end or in the beginning. It makes it a little bit easier once we can filter these out, now that we've identified exactly which ones. All right, so those are our 3 regex examples. Let me pull this away from my screen real quick. All right, so earlier I mentioned a couple references, how I learned regex. A big piece of that was the presentation from David Petranek at TC18. That's really what got me interested in regex. I definitely recommend going out there and watching that. Great session, about an hour long, if you have the time, right, to sit down and watch it. Some other blogs I referenced to kind of put this presentation together. There's a great blog in the Tableau resource section and one from the Data School. Pretty similar content, but it's a great introduction to regex and kind of helps you get started. And then finally, we talked about a way to kind of troubleshoot or create your own regex outside of Tableau. And that website at the bottom will help you do that. So there are some additional aspects to creating regex outside of Tableau that you probably need to know going in. There's a couple of different styles, I guess would be the word for it. But if you have questions on that, once you get to that website, feel free to reach out to me and I can kind of guide you through it. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll open up to any questions. If you have any regex projects of your own, feel free to reach out to me and we can kind of connect offline and can help out. But I want to thank y'all and open up to questions.
That's great, Tim. Thank you. Ton of information there. I thought the demo was really helpful. I know we all work with quite a bit of unstructured data. I don't think we have any new questions, but let me throw in here from Elena McGuire, McGuire and Brandon, with no last name, both dropped some other resources. So it's regexr.com is another kind of helpful examples and test stuff. So just regex and then lowercase r.com. And then there's regexpal tableau.com that Brandon recommended. Questions. Let me just give one more look here through questions. I think I interrupted you while we were vamping with the
Yeah, it's
other
all good.
questions, so we might not have too much left. Yeah, that should be, I think that's all of it. Now let me pop my video back up here. And so we want to go, we're going to transition to the tables now. John, if you're on here, do you need to set that? If he's on here, I'm trying to get this back. There he is.
Yeah, if you can hear me. So if we're ready, I'll turn off the presentations.
Let's close the presentation and get to the tables. So
right.
if there's no other questions there, I didn't see anything pop in the chat. Nope, just a lot of people talking about how awesome your content was, Tim. So you can bask in that. And so we're going to turn off the presentation. Again, Tableau doctors, thank you again to Christian Felix and Chris Scott. They're going to be set up at the two tables. As you look at the view, they'll be on the left side. So if you have something, I saw somebody named Kim was very interested in jumping into a table. So I'll give her first at bat wherever she ends up. And the rest of us, the speakers, will all kind of mix amongst the tables, and we can chat here for the rest of the time. I know a lot of people had to drop at 1, but we really appreciate everybody joining today. We hope the content was worth your time, and we'll let you know as soon as we have the next one scheduled. So let's close it up, get to the tables, and say hi.